Welcome, once again, dear viewers, back to the realm of Final Fantasy XIV. We're taking a step a little bit back, because this is a slightly older recording. However, today, we're tackling the final of the pre-2.2 Extreme Mode Primals, which means Ifrit Extreme. Now, Ifrit Extreme, for the tanks and DPS, isn't actually going to be that hard a fight, especially a downstep from Titan Extreme. However, for healers, this may not be the case. This is an exceptionally healing-intensive fight, and most failures can be attributed to the healers because so much is expected of them. In turn, remember, everything that you do for the sake of the healer. Make their job as easy as you can make it. Now, Ifrit Extreme is effectively only 3 phases. Phases 2 and 3 loop until the fight is done. And the Phase 2 of that 2 and 3 does get progressively more difficult as the fight goes on, but not overwhelmingly so. So let's hop on in and take a look at what is presented to us. The fight begins, and as always, we are gifted with a cutscene I'm going to be skipping. As far as party layout for this fight goes, I would suggest bringing as few melee DPS as possible. Preferably 1, and only 1, no more, no less. Though oftentimes people do this with a pure ranged party, if only because it makes the nail phase a little bit easier. The 2 healers are going to be spreading out to the left and right side of the arena, and everyone else is going to be stacking up on Ifrit's backside. And needless to say, no, we did not win on our first attempt. Now that we're all done yelling at each other, a couple things to note are, for one, there is a tank swap mechanic in this fight. Ifrit breathes fire, and that does put a stacking debuff on the person hit by it. That's a vulnerability up effect. One of the complications of this fight is that he does not use that attack at regular intervals. Sometimes he can use it 2, maybe 3 times back to back, and other times there could be a rather lengthy pause between them. Since the tank swapping will be inconsistent, the tanks are simply going to have to do the best job they can, and hope the healers can keep up. You can see the A, B, and C marked in the arena to the northeast corner of the arena. Those are effectively where Ifrit will be tanked as the fight goes on. We're going to be starting at A, and as the phases go on, we'll be moving to B and C. So, of course, to start, the tank's going to be pulling Ifrit over to A, and everyone's going to be piling on behind him. Now, make sure that you are available to run directly backwards. Not off to one side or the other, not just kind of backwards. Split the arena in half. You can see, looking at the mini-map in the corner, the 2 healers have actually split off to the left and right sides between us, and we're going to be running dead center between them. Now, you just saw Ifrit turn to the left and spit something out at the left healer. That is one of the more complicated, or I should say cumbersome, mechanics of this fight. He will put an effect on the healer, and this will alternate between the 2 healers. So he'll put it on one healer, and then when it wears off, he'll put it on the other healer. An effect called Searing Wind. Now, what Searing Wind does is it does no damage to the healer itself, aside from the initial impact, which is negligible damage. But as long as the effect lasts, that mage will pulse damage a very large area. If you remember back to even the hard mode fight of Ifrit, Ifrit himself would occasionally do a large pulse that would knock you back. Now the healers will be doing that. And if you get hit by it, it will take off a good half or more of your health. So please don't. This is why the healers are off to one side and the other, so if hit by it, they can't harm us. Now around the time the first healer pulses, you can see the pulse off to the left side of the screen, an eruption will appear beneath all of the players. This is why we are all stacked on Ifrit's hindside. All of us, range DPS and magic users included. When the eruption triggers, we start running backwards. We don't want to kill either of the healers, so we do this to stay away from everyone. And then we simply run back to Ifrit and keep beating on him. And that's effectively it for the first phase. You'll see a wheel of fire appear in front of Ifrit, and those of you who have done hard mode enough will recognize this. That means a nail phase is coming. Oh, but a nail phase coming when he's only at about 80% health? Why, yes, there is. There will be many nail phases in this fight. Though none of them are especially difficult, as far as the DPS check part of it goes, they will be difficult because the healers are still pulsing damage. This is the biggest reason why people generally prefer all ranged parties. The ranged DPS can simply sit there on Ifrit's backside and shoot all of the nails from there without concern. If you have a melee DPS, that melee DPS, though one strategy is for the healers to rotate around and get out of the melee's way, that is very difficult on the mages. So, instead of the difficulty being placed on the mages, it's instead placed on the melee DPS. Now, the first time this was suggested to me as something that I needed to do, I thought it was ridiculous. But I was told to simply pay attention to which healer was hit, and avoid that healer. Now, especially during a DPS check phase, the last thing on my mind is everything that's going on that doesn't involve me DPSing, especially paying attention to who somewhere else in the wide arena Ifrit is hitting with an ability. I will say, expecting a DPS to do this is expecting a lot out of the DPS. It's actually expecting them to do something that is perhaps the most unintuitive, difficult thing that you can ask a DPS to do. However, once you get the hang of it, it's not that bad. But if you ever wonder why every other melee DPS gets killed by this and can't manage it, you're asking a lot of them. So here's what I do. I simply watch Ifrit himself. Of everything that I'm doing while I'm beating on him right now, I'm watching Ifrit. He will turn, and this is the only time he turns, is to put Searing Wind on one of the healers. And you will see him turn and spit something out. Just out of your peripheral vision, be paying attention to that. If it flies to the left healer got hit. If it flies to the right healer got hit. Now right here when the nails come up, he will turn to hit a healer with Searing Wind almost immediately after the nails come up. It does not matter if he hit the other healer with Searing Wind just a moment before. I believe that one will wear off almost immediately and the new healer will be hit by it, but it always happens almost immediately after the nails spawn. And it's very simple then. If you see him turn and spit towards that healer, you go the other way. Which is why I know Ifrit is going to spit at the other healer. I saw him do it, and in turn, I'm running this way to punch this nail. Now, for the first nail phase here, this isn't that big a deal. The nails are generally far enough away from the healers that you can still generally poke one, even if the healer nearby is exploding. There are only 4 nails, and they should go down without much concern. He then just hit the healer I was standing next to with Searing Wind as I was running back to him. So I just barely dodged that one. You also saw an eruption there. During the nail phase, the off tank will be hit by eruption once. Near the end, I believe. In later nail phases, he may get hit by it once or twice. I'm not positive, but I suppose we'll see that as we get there. He leaps in the air, comes down, and he's ready to use his large attack. If you manage to destroy all of the nails, this will not hurt you. At least not a huge amount. Now, it's at this point that, despite that everyone else generally balls up right next to the tank for the healing and such, I do not. And I do not because that's a very, very good way to get yourself hit by Ifrit. After landing and finishing his attack, he will immediately walk towards the tank and swing. And his attack has a very wide cleave. I am constantly surprised by how far away from him I am, and I still get hit by it. So instead, I run right up next to Ifrit, and as soon as Ifrit starts walking, I walk through him to be behind him. This ensures I do not get hit. And now we're all on Ifrit's backside, beating on him once again. Now the first thing that happens is we see Plumes, glorious Plumes, filling the entire arena, except for a small section near these markers we've placed. And that is specifically why we've placed the markers over here. You are to run over to the safe spot. Since we should be tanking Ifrit right next to the marker, we should be safe to run right in. The two healers, one of the healers should also, the healer who does not have Searing Wind on them, should also run in, crowd in, and get in that safe spot along with the rest of us. If the other healer does have Searing Wind on them, they need to go to the complete opposite corner of the arena, where there is another safe spot. But get in the safe spot, get out of the explosion to get out of the way. Now that healer got hit with Searing Wind on the right, but other than that, we're back to beating on him. Now you see, though he got hit with Searing Wind, the eruptions did not come up. And that's because Ifrit is about to do his dashes. Jumps in the air, comes down to do his dashes. Now the dashes always go clockwise, and they will always start right on the other side of our safe spots. So if we run right over to where those safe spots are, you will always be ready. The dashes always happen in the same spot. The healers have this phase a little bit more difficult, because one of them probably has Searing Wind on them, so they don't want to be too close to anybody. But it's also quite the run to get the other healer in here next to all of us. So the two healers are actually on the opposite side of Ifrit's dashes, also running clockwise, just as we are. One healer will be near the front of the dash, and the other healer will be near the back. So the Searing Wind doesn't also hit the other healer. And after that, you've mostly seen the fight. The left healer just got hit with Searing Wind, so we're expecting the eruptions coming up soon. When I run back, I generally stagger my running. You do not want to sprint backwards, or strictly run backwards as fast as you possibly can. you may catch people who are a little bit slower to react. But you saw one of our healers died, and that healer actually died because he picked the worst time to decide to run in to toss off a few cures. He ran in just as our eruptions were going off. Though he was behind the eruptions, Ifrit himself let out a pulse that knocked him back, half killing him, into our eruptions, which did kill him. So for the healers, the best advice I can give is, do please be careful when you're trying to run in where everyone else is. Preferably, don't do it at all when eruptions are going off. But then we run back in and we beat on him again. He's now hitting the right healer with Searing Wind, so I know when the eruptions come, if I have to run off to one side, I'm safe running off to the left. If you stagger your steps, because you don't have to be entirely out of the cracks on the ground in order to avoid the next eruption. You can still be standing in at a surprisingly far amount. The next nail phase begins. The left healer just got hit with Searing Wind, but because the nail phase just started, the right healer is about to get hit with it itself, and there he is turning to hit that healer, and I'm running the crap away. Or the healer could be trying to rotate and confuse everyone. That is also a thing that can happen. Healers, if you're going to rotate, make sure we know. If you're not going to rotate, don't spontaneously decide to rotate. Pick a plan and stick with it. If we get killed, it's our dumb fault. Everyone else should be staying right near Ifrit's backside. Now there is one last mechanic that happens during the nail phases, and it doesn't look like we're getting to see much of it here. You can see a chain off there in the distance. A chain will occasionally connect the person who has the second most hate to a random DPS. The farther that chain extends, the more damage over time you're going to take, and the less damage you're going to be able to do, which is very bad for a DPS check phase. This is why I generally leave a couple nails right up next to Ifrit. I don't get the ones right near him, so if I get chained, of course the ranged DPS can DPS him all day long. But the ranged DPS can just do whatever all day long, but as a melee DPS, if I get chained, I like leaving those nails up close so I have something that I can beat on when I try to diminish the distance between me and the off-tank. Which, technically, it'll always be the person who has the second most hate, but that's pretty much always the off-tank. Ifrit hops back down, and we're ready to beat on him once again. The right healer is getting Searing Winded, so I know when we run backwards, we can run to the left to be safe. Why everyone is spreading out and why some people are running to the right is beyond me. It's really not that hard to just go straight backwards. Like, honestly, it's not that hard. The nails are spawning once again, and you'll notice not only are there all the nails around the edge, but there's also a very large nail right there in the middle. Typically, the big reason you bring a melee DPS to this fight is so you can limit break that big nail in the middle. You see, not only does the big nail in the middle take more of a beating than everything else, but, as I'm sure you may have noticed up until now, when you defeat one of the nails, it actually pulses out damage, raid-wide damage, of a respectable amount, and this is something the healers also have to heal. Not only that, but it also puts a vulnerability up debuff on you very briefly. This vulnerability up debuff is effectively meaningless. The big reason it's there is so you don't mage limit break the nails. Because if you mage limit break the nails, you're going to have about 18 stacks of vulnerability up on you, and then get hit by the raid-wide damage from the nails exploding. You're just going to die. Outright. So of course I know I'm safe to run to the right, so I'm going to beat on this nail. You see, the other healer just got hit by Searing Wind, so I'm safe to keep running. And we're just taking down the nails, one at a time. The healer is standing next to me, that's perfectly fine, since I know the other healer has the Searing Wind effect on them. It lasts long enough that I don't feel I need to be watching Ifrit every step of the way, but I should probably be taking a gander near Ifrit here soon. Why everyone is crowding around me is beyond me. They should really be on Ifrit's butt. The off-tank, Wind Chained, if he's not actually tanking right at that moment, he can run out and stand next to the melee DPS if he's tied to the melee. Which is a little bit of extra DPS that we get, and we get to shorten the chain. However, when the off-tank needs to swap with the other tank, he will need to run back, and the melee DPS will need to follow him, which is why I conveniently have a nail here waiting for me, that I opted not to destroy, so I have something to do. Now the chain is gone, the nail is defeated, and we are safe to run over here. The off-tank, and this is where things get a little bit messy, the off-tank just got put another chain connecting him to another random DPS. Now, the off-tank decided to run over and help us DPS. However, I'm not sure if the main tank had too many stacks on him, or maybe he just got hit a little unluckily, but the main tank just died. Since the main tank just died, and the off-tank is way over here, Ifrit's going to be coming over here. And he just lit pretty much all of our dudes on fire. This nearly killed the summoner, it nearly killed a bard. The off-tank, thankfully, managed to go over and get Ifrit under control, but we're all kinda hurting now, and we're down a tank, and the other tank has way too many stacks on him. We were in kind of a bad position. And though when this happened initially, I didn't know enough of what was going on around me to know what exactly was happening. But you see, someone just did a level 3 limit break. Specifically, the healer did. And at the time, of course, I was freaking out and going, what idiot just limit braked? I need to limit break the big nail in the middle. However, in retrospect, actually knowing what exactly was going on, seeing as we were down one tank and the other tank had some 5 stacks on him, I'm gonna go ahead and side with the healers on this one. It's going to put us in a very bad position for dealing with the large nail, but at least we're not going to wipe immediately. We just have to hope that we have the DPS to take down this big nail. And of course, you see the other tank, the one that had the 5-odd stacks on him, just got killed. Because honestly, he had like 5 stacks on him. So once again, the big attack comes, and this is where, once again, things get a little messy. First of all, we take a little bit of damage from this. Secondly, of course you want to avoid getting hit by Ifrit. However, one of the bards, I do believe, wasn't exactly paying attention to which healer had the debuff, had Searing Wind on them. And, for some reason I cannot even begin to comprehend, decided it was a good idea to run directly over to where that healer was. And now we're down a bard. You can see right there, Our bard did not do what I suggest to avoid getting hit by Ifrit's initial swing. He had not yet been cured due to Ifrit's large attack, and in turn, he just got killed by the swing. So now we're down a DPS. Okay, so we're down a tank and we're down 2 DPS. Things aren't exactly looking fantastic for us, but this is Ifrit's final phase. There's honestly nothing left here, and we're only down 2 DPS because they're dumb. And we're only down a tank because of a really inopportunely timed death on the other tank's part. Now, granted, I don't exactly know what went into that. It could have been pure luck, for all that matters. We're hanging on by a thread, though. And so that tank will get brought back just in time for the dashes, which we're doing the same thing we've always done for. As long as the healers can manage, we should be alright there. Both tanks are alive, despite that they're both weakened, so that's going to end beautifully for them. Now, one of our DPS managed to get revived. However, he decided to pick, of all times, to actually accept the revival, to be when the healer that revived him had Searing Wind on them. And so, in a blind panic to get away from the healer with Searing Wind on them, he decided to run directly behind us, which is the worst place he could have possibly been to avoid killing us with eruptions, and almost killing the other healer because we didn't have anywhere to go. But, thankfully, Ifrit didn't have much health left. And so the fight comes to an end. And judging by the number of achievements we've got, there were a lot of new people in here, and to be honest, it felt like there were a lot of new people in here. And of course, the loot we get is the whistle that everyone craves. And of course, it goes to one of the people who just won this the first time. I'm not even paying attention to who won it. I can't even read the text from here, but it probably went to one of the people who died constantly. Because that's how this works. Until next time, everyone. Ifrit Extreme, it really ain't that hard if you people just aren't dumb.